Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back to a Mazzy's Mix. This one I'm concentrating just on new reissues that I've acquired the first 2 months of 2024. These have come over the last year. Some of them just came out very recently. Some are represses. And I'm mostly concentrating on reissues where the originals were sort of hard to get, more obscure in some ways, and not, the typical repress after repress after reissue. Now, there are a couple of those as well. I want to start with a Seattle-based label, Light in the Attic. I want to show this record, Pete Jolly's Seasons. And I'll tell you why in a minute, this is sort of controversial with my group of friends because I've been promoting this to them through my Instagram and just telling them about it. And I know one of my friends streamed it while he was driving. He wasn't having it. He told me, no, you're wrong, Mazzy. It's not good. That's like commercial bullshit. Commercial advertising TV show bullshit. I think he's wrong. But again, music is subjective. We all have different tastes. But this record was sitting in sort of my inbox. I have a flip through thing of records that have come in and sat here for a few weeks. And I had seen this cover and never knew anything about Pete Jolly, who is a kind of jazzy keyboard player. Played with a lot of artists throughout the 1960s. And this was his third album for A&M Records, produced by Herb Alpert in 1970. This was recorded in a 4-hour session, and the parts and pieces and the jamming was edited together to make this record. So you'll hear fade in and fade out at times. In a way, think about it. In 1970 is when Bitches Brew came out, the Miles Davis album. And that was recorded in a similar way. A lot of jamming with Miles and all the musicians there, and the producer at the time, Teo Maceo, who worked a lot with Miles Davis, edited those tapes together, and what was produced was Bitches Brew, and this is similar. Again, they sound nothing alike. This has a modernist, futuristic sound for the time. It almost sounds like synthesized electronic, but it's really not. Light in the Attic has these extensive liner note sheets, usually in most of their records. And let me tell you about Pete Jolly on this record. He plays grand piano, Wurlitzer electronic piano, accordion musette, Sano Vox, and Hammond organ. You also have Chuck Berghofer on bass. The bass on here, and the bass and the percussion really are the balance on this record that really make this a really attractive record for me and my taste, and surprisingly so. You also have John Pisano, Paul Humphrey, and then you got two percussionists, one on the traps, drums, Milt Holland, great drummer, and Emil Richards on percussion. Now, he also is a vibraphonist. I think he toured with George Harrison, actually, for the 74 tour, but he's been on a lot of recordings, a lot of session work. But I put this record on, and it sounds sort of almost Moogie synthesizer-like, but again, that's not what it is at the outset. And it tours on these really surprises. Again, sometimes it'll fade in and out, and there'll be this burst of an accordion-like instrument, the accordion musette, I guess. And so it'll sound like an Italian soundtrack on parts of it. Sometimes it'll sound like a television theme. It's really interesting. I'm always talking about the music first, but if the music does sound good, I never said don't go for the best sounding record, but this record has been long out of print. I think it went out of print in 1971. Also, this is a record that was sampled by a lot of people. So there's a lot of people, a lot of collectors, a lot of DJs who know this record and have sampled it, including it's been sampled by De La Soul and Cypress Hill, amongst others. But it's a really, really unique piece. It is in a way like an artifact of its time, a record in 1970 that probably didn't fit in with anything else because it was sort of passed by. But I think this is a cool record. Now, as soon as I opened this, I looked at this picture of Pete Jolly. I don't know what he looks like, but he reminds me of, if you know New Wave cinema of France, you know the movie Breathless, especially. That film, he looks like Jean-Paul Belmondo. And I'm going to do a little insert here of Jean-Paul Belmondo, and you tell me if there's not a similarity. But Breathless is a great film, and I just looked at it, I thought, this is like French New Wave here. gatefold record, and this is in this kind of colored vinyl, actually literally kind of an orange kind of colored vinyl that matches my turntable lamp, ironically. So I know I went on about this record, but there's something about this record. I played it twice again last night. It just makes me smile, makes me feel good. And there are surprises. So stream it if that's your thing, but try to stream it through your stereo and listen to it. I mean, the recording sounds so good. It's really well produced. And I think it's really, if you're a musician, if you're into experimentation, keyboards and anything, I think this is really an interesting record for you. So I would check it out. Pete Jolly, Seasons. Next, an album that has been out in and out of print for a while and finally repressed again by Light in the Attic. And I love this record. Now, this is Serge Gainsbourg's Histoire de Melody Nelson. This came out in 1971, was a concept album. And, you know, it's so French in so many ways because it's really about an illicit affair between an old man and a way too young woman. But musically, this is a gorgeous piece of, it's a little orchestrated, surreal French moodiness and electric guitar where psychedelia fuses with orchestration. This was produced by Jean-Claude Desmartes, very influential on artists like Beck. In fact, if you know Sea Changes, there's that song Paper Tiger on that album, Paper Lion, Paper Tiger, Paper Tiger. They really take exactly sample from this album and has that orchestration, or they recreate it. This is a magnificent record, and I think it's an important record to include in your collection. This new edition is on clear vinyl, if that matters to you. And again, it also has extensive liner notes inside. An analog cut of Karen Dalton's first album. This has been on and off again, I think pressed by Light in the Attic. I think this is a new cut. This was cut by Kevin Gray, and this is her first album that was on Capitol Records in 1969. And she is a folk blues, a country blues artist, and her voice is an acquired taste, but I have several friends that just love her. I have another Light in the Attic record that came out in the last couple of years that is unreleased music and tapes, and part of the recordings I think that Harvey Brooks, the bass player, did, but this is one that, again, it didn't do a lot, but she's become such a cult artist that so many folk and blues artists and rock artists have been influenced by her quite a bit. On here is, and she covers songs by Fred Neil, by Leadbelly, by Tim Hardin. Tim Hardin's a very favorite of mine. Fred Neil, you might know from writing Everybody's Talking, the song that Harry Nilsson made famous for Midnight Cowboy, as well as a song that has been covered just beautifully by a lot of even the blues psychedelic artists, and that's the song Dolphins. Fred Neil's version is great, and he literally quit folk singing music and went down and worked on dolphins and porpoise reserves in Florida. But she never really made it as a folk singer. Dylan was a contemporary in the whole Greenwich Village scene in the early 60s, around that time of Dylan and Joan Baez and Fred Neil and all those great artists. Again, another wonderful collection by Light in the Attic with extensive liner notes as well. I think this is a new cut from Light in the Attic. So if you have the other one, I don't know the difference. I don't really A/B things like this, but this is a really good record. There's a kind of just a rural bluesy feel to this. It doesn't really sound like what was happening in the New York Greenwich Village scene. It sounds more like the country blues from the South, definitely. So love that record. I want to do a little kind of a crossover here because this record I got in the last couple of years, this wasn't recent, but this was a band that I remember hearing about the mid-90s, and I never jumped into that. That was Acetone. Now, this is a Light in the Attic comp that I got about a year ago, and I didn't know anything about it. I put this on. I was so into this record. I got so into this record. I think I played this record more than any other record for about a month after I got it. They are a kind of an alt-country, indie, dirgy sound. They got some, country crazy horse sounds to it. Sometimes when they're jamming, they get into that crazy horse, really thick jamming. But what's amazing about their music and the recording is it's lo-fi, but not, I want to say lo-fi, but not really. That's basically saying, I'm telling you what it is, but I'm taking it right back, because it's got a very dry sound. You know, they do have some alt country, Graham Parsonsy, even some Beach Boys, not major, you know, overproduced harmonies like that, but there's something about this record. Now, this might be a good start for you, this comp. This gives you an idea. I think this originally was put out around 2017 or 18 by Light in the Attic, but it was repressed in the last year, just in time to get me influenced, because I tell you, I went all in, or at least I think they did 5 records altogether. And in the last year, New West, completely different label, put out a box set, which I missed. I didn't even know it was coming out. It sold out pretty fast of, I believe, was it 4 of their records? I think the one on Virgin, they did a record on Virgin, wasn't part of this repress. But over the last several months, I actually been buying the individual copies. So if you can find these, and I don't even know to recommend any one of these. These came out, I think, from a period of like 1992. These are on New West Records. All are double records, because I think a lot of these originally came out on compact discs. So the originals, I think, go for a lot of money, because again, it was during the CD era. But New West, check these out. To me, they overlap. Now, some have more acoustic, softer sound. Some get more dirge-like. And to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you the difference. I spent an entire weekend, 2 weekends, putting these on all day and just letting them play. And I didn't really pay attention to which one was which. And for me, it didn't matter. I just liked the mood. There's a mood to this band, Acetone. There you go. They started out as a trio, I believe. If You Only Knew. York Boulevard. And Cindy. I didn't take the shrink wrap off. Again, they have this sort of a similar hype sticker here. This is the first time on vinyl since 1993. Mastered at RCA Studios, cut at Abbey Road. I don't know. They sound really good. My guess is they're from a digital cut. I don't really care, because they sound so good. So dynamic, so tight, so dry. And it's really a beautiful, beautiful sounding thing. There is a note here by Hope Sandoval from Mazzy Star. She played with them. They were on the bills together with Mazzy Star for a while back, and when both were touring, and Hope actually sang with them on several tracks and things. So Acetone. Now, another record company that is doing some amazing stuff, it's Jackpot Records. Jackpot Records is actually a retail store in Portland, Oregon. I've been there. I don't always find a lot of stuff in the store, but I tell you, maybe because I have so much stuff, but I tell you, their reissue label, they're kicking ass on the indie reissue scene, Jackpot Records. Mostly all analog. They've been working with Kevin Gray, cutting a lot of these records. They did those great Meters records. I think they did, 3, 4 Meters records. I got 3 of them, because 2 or 3, because I have some originals, but I picked up the ones I don't have. They had, I think they also did Booker T, but they put out several albums of Electric Prunes. This is underground. This is a record I no longer have. The original Warner Brothers versions of these are pricey. So this, again, cut by Kevin Gray, apparently from the original mastered tapes. There's a psychedelic sound to this. Of course, everyone knows I had Too Much to Dream last night, not from this album. But this is really good. This is now my Realize I didn't know very well. I do have a box set CD that has all their records, and putting this on, this is where I like vinyl. I know you can do it with compact discs, but I tend to not pay attention when I put a CD on. I'm usually working, and that's just my thing. When I put a record on, a vinyl album, I'm paying attention. I'm sitting around. I'm listening. This was wonderful. Again, another one I played back to back twice. So cut by Kevin Gray on Jackpot Records. Another record I have, the only version I've had, is the Mo-Fi version, which is okay. They put out this wonderful record. To me, one of the best photographic record covers ever, ever, ever. Front cover by Tony Frizzell. And this is a beautiful record. And what's nice about this over the MoFi, you don't have that silly silver bar here. You just let it breathe. I think there was a hype sticker. But this is Bill Evans and Jim Hall. This is a beautiful record. Again, all analog apparently, cut by Kevin Gray. Jackpot Records is killing it right now. They don't do a lot of things, but they do a few things right. Their price point, I think these are like in the States around $29, $28, which I think is very fair for an all analog cut of records that are really kind of hard to get. Again, finding originals on these go for like 80 to 100 bucks plus on United Artists when it came out. And so they're not easy. And then even finding a clean one goes beyond that. This is a record that blew me away. Now, I'm familiar with Tony Rice. Tony Rice was part of the new grass movement, bluegrass, new grass, folk blues, folk grass, country grass, all the grasses is Tony Rice. He's played with Jerry Garcia, he's played with Norman Blake, the great guitar player, with Vassar Clements, and I have a bunch of him on various records. And for whatever reason, I no longer have his records. And what's really interesting and surprising, that originals of his records go for $80 to $120 or so. They're very rare. This record was originally on Sugar Hill Records, and it's coming out right now on by Kraft, and it's an all analog cut. I believe this is also cut by Kevin Gray, so this is sort of a Kevin Gray cavalcade of cutting. So my hat's off to you, or gonna keep my hat on to you, Kevin. But if you like acoustic music, if you like country, just great bluegrass and great acoustic guitar playing, it gets a little jazzy at times too. Now, this is half, I'd say maybe half or a little less than half instrumental, and he does vocals on here, and the vocals are actually really good. It's a beautiful, beautiful record on here. Recorded in Berkeley in 1983, and it just sounds so good. Now, there's a lot of songs on here that I recognize. There's a great version of the Ralph McTell song called Streets of London. It's been covered so many times. But one of my favorite songs on here, well, two of my favorite songs. Last Thing on My Mind is a beautiful folk song written by Tom Paxton. In fact, The Move, the English band The Move, covered it with a really heaviosity. I think it was on Shazam, that version of that, which is totally different than the original. But it closed out. I don't think I had ever heard this song. I just played it and I was listening to it. The last song was called Pride of Man, which I love that song. My junior high school band and high school band played that song. Pride of Man, written by Hamilton Camp, the great folk singer and actor. Those of you who are into psychedelia may know that song. It's the opening track on the first Quicksilver Messenger Service album. Pride of Man, great, great song. Beautiful recording. And I think they should release more of his records. Next, an album that I got, I think earlier this year, is on Earth Records. I have a lot of their records of the reissues they've been doing of Bert Jansch, a great series of Bert Jansch records. This is an album I adore. I'm a big fan of Pearls Before Swine. Tom Rapp was their lead singer with a slight lisp there, and it's what we call it now. It's really psychedelic freak folk music. I am all in on Pearls Before Swine. Their first couple of records were on ESP disc, ESP Records, the jazz label out of New York. Artists weren't paid. Either was Tom Rapp, Pearls Before Swine. They were later picked up by Warner, I guess Reprise Records. They did a bunch of records, and then Tom Rapp recorded a series of solo records for not only Warner and then Blue Thumb Records. I'm a huge fan. He just died in the last couple of years, Tom Rapp. But they got a dirge-like sound. And this is an expanded version, which includes ESP outtakes. So it's a 2-record set. It's got a couple of radio sessions. There is a psychedelic intensity about it. It's dreamy music. It's almost, they have this, I don't know if this is a Hieronymus Bosch painting. It probably is. And is this hell? The first few albums have these really kind of scary, doom-like paintings. Yeah, Hieronymus Bosch, The Garden of Delights, Dutch, 1460 to 1560. And this is from a museum in Madrid, this painting with permission. But this is a wonderful record. Anything you get by Pearls Before Swine, I've showcased them on other videos I've done. I just love them. So having this expanded edition for my collection, I'm a completist when it comes to this band. Point Doom is adjacent to Zuma Beach in Southern California, and it's near where Crazy Horse recorded the Zuma record. And Neil Young, you know, like King Gizzard, seems to put out a record every 16 seconds. And sometimes it can get way too much, all too much. It's all too much. This is something that's a welcome to a lot of people. A lot of people cite Zuma as one of their top 3 or 4 Neil Young records. It's not one of mine, but I realize listening to this a couple of times already how great this record is. Of course, I knew it before. I have my original copies. This is an expanded version that has, you know, everything they recorded, or mostly everything they recorded, not everything, but a lot of the stuff during the Zuma sessions, and sort of reconfigured as a double album, as if it was a complete album, as if this is the way it was meant to be all along. Who knows? But it is the typical Neil Young, beautiful heavy cover stock, beautiful pressings. Again, I want to kind of hark back to that first album by Acetone, those albums by Acetone, where I mentioned they kind of had this feel of Crazy Horse. After I played this, I put Acetone on again, and it has that dry sound. Now, of course, what I like about, I can't imagine anyone else who did it the same way as Neil Young and Crazy Horse. All their records were dry, even with their psychedelic, jammy stuff. It was never that, I shouldn't say never, it was rarely that reverb-drenched guitar thing that was happening around this time, or from the 1960s. There's a certain sound on here. And Neil Young is someone who gets away with loud, intense music, but it doesn't sound loud, even though it is loud. The way it's not compressed, but it is really direct and really immediate. And that's what I loved about this record. This is just a great album produced by David Briggs and Neil Young. And I think, you know, this could replace the original Zuma. All of it is electric except side 4, where you have a couple of, I think, 2 acoustic tracks, great version of Pocahontas, and a piano-led track on here. But I think this is going to be one of the highlights in terms of reissues of 2024. Neil Young's Doom. And now 2 Mobile Fidelity records. Good As I've Been to You, Bob Dylan. This is the first time Mobile Fidelity has put this out. This came obviously during a time of the compact disc. Dylan did 2 back-to-back acoustic country blues folk records, just him and his guitar. This is one of them. This is a wonderful sounding record. I think it might be a music on vinyl version. I forgot what edition I have, but this exceeds that. This exceeds the compact disc. It is from a DSD to analog console, so it does have that step that people either like or dislike, but this sounds really good. The guitars are crisp. I like this record. This is a great period. I think Dylan needed to take a beat and pull back and do something a little different. This is from 1992, but if you're a Dylan person, this is, I think, essential in the Dylan catalog. Bob Dylan, a wonderful acoustic record by Bob Dylan. Next is a band I adore, and you already know I adore it because I really pushed this band down your throat for the last several months, and that's Little Feat. This is their debut album. This record was available some years ago on Mobile Fidelity, and this is the first time in a while it's been repressed. This is one of their all analog cuts, no DSD step. This is, again, the debut album when Lowell George and Roy Estrada left the Mothers of Invention, and with Frank Zappa's help, got him signed to Warner Brothers. Produced by Russ Titleman. This is a wonderful record. They're a LA band. They're a country rock, southern roots from LA though, from East LA in a way. Lowell George is fantastic slide guitar playing. Ironically, when they recorded this at one point, I think Lowell George injured his hand. So there's a version, the very first version they did of the song Willin' on here. Ry Cooder plays on the slide, the bottleneck, beautifully. They re-recorded that song again on their next record, of course, Linda Ronstadt, C-Train, so many bands. The Byrds covered Willin'. If you give me weed, whites, and wine, and show me a sign, I'd be willing to be moving. What a great, great song. Beautiful record. Again, the gatefold of Mobile Fidelity, the original, was not a gatefold, but this sounds great. I don't have an original green label anymore of this. This exceeds the palm tree version I have. I don't have an original. I say if you have a green, it probably might be marginally better, but that's subjective always, you know. But I like the mastering of this, and I like how this record sounds. And lastly, I'm going to end up with a box set from the Numero Group, another label I really adore, the way they package unreleased material or material that's really rare. And they put a series of comps together, some great soul comps, some very regional projects of soul and rock and indie music and grunge. And this record by the American Analog Set, this box set just came out, called New Drifters, the Numero Group 229. That is the catalog number. I hadn't heard these before, but I heard again of this group. These original records apparently have been going for quite a lot. And they're not like, but not unlike, records by Acetone that I said before. They're kind of somewhat contemporaries. The American Analog Set was from Austin, Texas. They were around from 1995 to 2005. And then they regrouped again. I think they put an album out last year, which I have not heard. This is 3 records of their work, plus a double record comp. Amazing presentation, amazing music. Again, it has that dry sound. They're a lo-fi indie band. So there's a certain, again, an intimacy about this music that's really wonderful. You know, they're influenced by artists like dream pop artists like Cocteau Twins, but they're not as spatial as obviously the Cocteau Twins. They got a little bit of the, krautrock, Kraftwerk type things, but again, they're not that. They're their own thing. Slowcore probably is a good description of what they do. Like everything with the Numero Group, they have a really detailed booklet, well-designed booklet. Again, these labels that are doing these kind of things just do wonderful curation of these bands that maybe weren't as important in the long run, but again, bands that are very influential to what's happening. The indie scene, obviously, in the 1990s was very particular, and a lot of bands, were rediscovered in the last few years from this. Of course, their influence, again, going back to Velvet Underground and Pearls Before Swine and bands like that. I think there's a resurgence in this kind of stuff obviously with Acetone reissues coming out, with the American Analog Set coming out. I think with all the overproduced music, and I gotta say this at the end. I don't think I have anything else to say about this, but when you watch me, you probably think Mazzy loves everything, and I do love a lot. But I bought a new album on Friday. I'm not gonna even show it now, but it's a new album by MGMT. Now, not Management, but MGMT. Their first 2 albums I adore, and they're very lush, wonderful produced, over-the-top produced pop records in the vein of 10cc and Queen, maybe contemporary or Jellyfish as well, maybe 10 years later or 15 years later than Jellyfish. And I bought their new album, and I put it on after, and in between I was playing Analog Set, Neil Young, Crazy Horse, Dune, and the Acetone. And I want to tell you, I absolutely hated it. I don't know what it was. It was almost so produced, so contrived. It had some little Britpop flourishes. It was almost too thick. Maybe it was the mood I was in, but I usually like everything. And I really like that big sound. I think for what that is today, a group like the Lemon Twigs is doing it better. I think they're more interesting. Again, it's very, thought out, whereas these bands like American Analog and Acetone, and even Neil Young, it seems more free form. It seems more organic. And I'm just going to leave you with that. I don't know what it was. I have a copy here I'm going to give away to someone, I think. I don't want to bring it back at a store, but that's all I have to say. Great reissues right now. All these labels are doing great stuff. The big labels and the small labels. And I'm glad this stuff is available on vinyl again. So thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.